will be a conference. We call it Democracy and Power, a global forum on governance. So we still don't know where are we gonna do it. So instead of the last class, we're gonna make this forum. It's 3 hours in the morning from 10 to 1 o'clock, and 3 hours in the afternoon from 2 until 5. Okay? So this forum, we try to discuss the things that we have discussed in the class. So it's democracy. Does it fix the general concept of democracy? Is democracy good and bad? Can we, use the same concept of democracy in the West and in other countries? Does the political institution should be based on traditions and local and features of the population, or could be the same everywhere? So the point of this conference is to make a debate between us, try to make the fact that we come all from different nationality, to make it a proper discussion. So you're warmly invited to think what you want to say and speak in the class. For the afternoon session, we will have 0.25 credits more. 0.25 credits more. We're going to talk about this more next week. We're going to involve also students from the 3rd year for sure, and maybe also from the 1st year. Okay, so this is going to be the last class, April 9, from 10 o'clock until 5 in the afternoon. What else? Nothing. So, last 2 classes were dedicated to study socialism. So let's slowly recap what do you have to remind for socialism. For socialism, first, we have, so right now we're in the 3rd part of our course. The course of history of political thought is 4 parts: antiquity and Middle Ages, then we have the social contract years, and then we enter mature modernity. We're in mature modernity. Mature modernity, so the ideas of the Enlightenment and the results of the Enlightenment of the social contract theories, which are 2 major political revolutions: French Revolution and American Revolution, in which new ideas that we still nowadays have become reality. A state which is the result of a social contract between the people and the government, the idea that sovereignty belongs to the people, the idea that people are equal. They are born equal, so they must have equal rights, so they must be equal citizens. The declarations of the right of the man and of the citizen, the idea of human rights, the idea of citizen rights, which are the civil rights and the political rights. So what are the civil rights? What are the civil rights? Sabrina, what are the civil rights?
Civil rights are
No, civil rights is civil rights.
right to vote. Right to vote, right to
No.
property,
No.
right to life,
If you want, but it's not. Like, let's say civil rights.
right to speech,
Yes, right to speech.
right to expression,
Property.
freedom,
Yeah.
life,
Isn't it all of the negative freedoms according to law? So would be freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom
Yeah,
of
these are civil rights.
these
Yeah.
are the
Yeah, but there is one civil right that is more important than the others. Failure.
right to vote.
This is not civil rights. This is not civil rights. What's your name again? Yeah. Simona, you got Turkey cum laude, so you must know what is the most important civil right. Equality in which sense? Equality in front of the law. Equality in front of the law. We are all equal in front of the law. This means if you commit a crime, either you're super rich and you're a billionaire and you're very important, you're the chief of government. If you steal, you must go in front of the court and have the same laws applies to you as the last deprived, bump in the middle of the street. Civil equality, civil rights. This is civil rights, civil rights. This is why when you see movements for civil rights means movements against discrimination, like against apartheid. In the countries like in the United States in the 20th century, you didn't have civil rights equals the same for everybody, because the so-called the Negroes, so the Afro-Americans, they didn't have the same rights as the white people. The same happened in South Africa with the apartheid, and right now, nowadays, we have this civil rights movement of LGBT people who say, yeah, we want the same rights because we want to be married, we want to have the right to marriage, so we want to be equal in front of the law. And then, yeah, of course, you have the right of speech. But let's say, for example, if you say freedom of speech, freedom of religion, they're civil rights. But right now, we consider these rights, the freedom of speech, the right to life, the right to believe in the God that you want. We consider these as not civil rights, but
Social?
no.
Cultural?
Who said that? Who was it?
Culture?
No, who said that? But human rights. This means, let's go again about the rights. So rights, we have legal rights and human rights. Human rights are linked to the fact that you're a human being. That as a species, as an animal, you're a human. So since you're a human, we believed as Western civilization that you should be granted human rights, which independently under the country you live. So we think that human rights should be respected everywhere, independently from the country. And we put the United Nations to guarantee human rights. You have international courts of justice to protect human rights. Like the idea that your life, right to life, the state cannot kill you, cannot touch your life, unless you have that penalty and a fair trial. Right to life, right to speech, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, you can believe in the God you want. These are human rights. We think you have this right because you're a human being, and Western civilization is all about protecting and defending and spreading human rights all over the world. Okay? Civil rights and human rights somehow overlap because we say that the right to have a fair trial is crucial. So, for example, right now we say, Russia is bad, is doing war on Ukraine, and is very bad, but it's also the fact that it's bad. We see it because it doesn't respect human rights. Why? Because if you're an opposition, they put you in jail without a fair trial. Like Alexei Navalny, he was the opposition. They found a way to make a process to make him in jail and to kill him. Right? Or, I don't know, Anna Politkovskaya, they poisoned her. Right? So, we think that states must respect human rights, and somehow they overlap, human rights and civil rights. So, human rights, because you're a human being. Then you have the legal rights, who are civil rights, political rights, and social rights, we say. Civil rights, you're all equal in front of the law. Then we have the second kind of rights are the rights. What is the second kind of rights you mentioned already before? Political rights. The right to vote. This is to have, positive freedom, to only obey to the laws that you have contributed to create. So political rights. Right to vote, the legislative power. This is what makes a state a democratic state, that people have political rights, that they elect their representatives. Okay, this is what we call democracy in Western countries. Then, at the final conference, we will discuss if this is correct or incorrect. So that political rights, you vote and you have a choice. You don't have only one party. You have more parties. And you can vote for your representative, but you can also candidate as a representative, and they're not gonna kill you. So this is what we call democracy, political rights. Liberalism, civil rights. Democracy, civil rights plus political rights, very important. So this is the things. We have the French Revolution, we have the American Revolution, French Revolution and American Revolution. They established civil rights, political rights, equal for everybody. They say all men are born equal and they have to be equal citizens with equal rights. Okay, so this is what happened. 19th century, we also have another revolution, which is not a political revolution, it's a social revolution, the industrial revolution. The industrial revolution, it happened in this new context, we have equality and so on, civil rights, political rights, but the industrial revolution creates new social inequalities. Because with the industrial revolution, you can create a huge amount of wealth, a lot of money. You can make a lot of money, you can make a lot of wealth, because you apply energy to producing goods, so you can produce much more goods than in the past. These goods become commodities because you trade them all over the nation, all over the world, through new means of transportations, like boats, we have engines, like the trains. So you have this huge growth of wealth, but you also have a new form of poverty, the new forms of poverty of the people who go to work in factories. This new class, the industrial class, the working class, the proletariat, people who goes in work in the manufacturing cities and they really have zero property, and they can only sell their workforce and get a salary in exchange, but this salary is barely enough to pay your rent and the food for your family, and you cannot very much survive very well. So socialism is the political theory who say we have to focus on these social inequalities. Yeah, it's good to have equal legal rights, it's good to have equal political rights, but what about the rights in society? What about the rights in society? If you're poor and you cannot afford to be alive through healthcare, to pay for your doctor, if you have political rights but you're illiterate and really don't know how to do it, you cannot exercise these rights. The Declaration of the Human Rights, the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution say we all born equal, but then we see that in reality, meaning in society, we do not have this equality. We're so unequal because private property is so different and we see people living in extreme poverty. So socialism is about saying you liberal, you Democrats only focus on the law, on the state. We socialists focus on society and introduce a new third kind of rights, which are right now, yes, social rights, social right to education, social right to healthcare, social rights in terms of labor rights. You cannot work more than 8 hours per day. You have the right to a pension for upon retirement. When you're too old, you must have the money to survive, otherwise you're gonna die, and this is sad. You have 1 day per week, you can rest, you need a salary which is a decent salary which allows you to survive. Social rights to belong to the social sphere. So you have civil rights, which are legal rights, belong to the law, equality in front of the law. Political rights in the sphere of politics, voting and being voted. Social rights are the rights in society that promotes, more equality in society. So socialism, social rights, easy. Socialist society, social rights, easy. You can't be wrong. Okay? The most important thinker is Karl Marx. Karl Marx, philosopher, but mostly a revolutionary person. He always fought for revolution. So, what are the points in Karl Marx that you have to remind? First, Marx is the completely new era of political thought. Because first he said, all the people before me Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, and blah blah blah, they focused on the social contract, sovereignty, and the state. I focus on society. I focus on society. And he calls it materialism, because instead of looking at the abstract thing, it's materialist. So he wants to be a realist, Karl Marx. He wants to be a realist. So yeah, he wants to think about the ideal society, which is communism. But to build the idealist society, he only wants to look at reality. It's not like utopian socialism or say, yes, society should be like this. No, he said, to build the future society, I have to look at capitalism. To build communism, I have to develop a critique of capitalism. So, he said materialism. Materialism. Looking at society, looking at things as they are. And so he starts to say, I want to do a historical materialism, a history of societies. And so he analyzed the history of society instead of looking at the political institution, at the republic, at the democracy, and blah, he looked at society. And he came up with this idea, which is the first line of the manifesto of the Communist Party. All society, the history of all society that have existed in human history is a history of class struggles. So he's saying if you look at society, society is divided in classes. And there is a ruling class, and the political institutions are just the representation of these ruling classes. So he said, when the aristocracy was the predominant classes, then the government was absolute monarchy based on aristocracy. When the bourgeoisie made the French Revolution, they changed it with the modern state, but the modern state only makes the interest of the rich people. The modern state is only done to protect private property. The foundation of the modern state is the protection of private property, because this political system is the representation of the ruling class, which is the bourgeoisie. So this is a theory of how history changes. So he said, ancient Rome, you had the conflict between patricians and plebeians. And when this conflict started to explode, you have the collapse of the Roman Empire. Then you have the feudal system. Then you have the slaves against the masters. Then you have the aristocracy against the bourgeoisie. And when something explodes, you pass from one society to another. So he said the bourgeoisie made the capitalist system. The capitalist system is based on the dominion of the domination of the bourgeoisie, of the capitalists. But his theory, he makes a theory of how it will change again in the future. So what he says is, right now capitalists dominate society, but capitalism needs labor to produce commodities. So it needs to increase and increase and increase and increase the working class. But the working class has different interests. It's not capitalism is not the best system for the working class. So the most capitalism grow, the most it will become in contradiction with the working class which is growing, and so we will pass from capitalism to the next era of human history, which will be the first society without classes, because it will be based on equality, on social equality, not on political equality or civil equality. It will be based on real social equality, no classes anymore. And it will become communism, because private property will be abolished and most things will be in common. Will be in common. Will be in common. Then what is it? How do we go there? It's somehow a thing that results from the development of capitalism, so somehow is within the system, is within the history, but at the same time you need a subjective, active part of the working class to make the revolution. So he said we have to make a revolution of the working class. The The working class make a revolution against capitalism, and we go from capitalist society to socialism, to communism. So what he wrote also is the fact that in this transition, so you establish, you abolish capitalist society, and in the middle you have to make a transition towards a communist society. This transition, we call it the dittatura del proletariato, proletariat dictatorship, proletariat dictatorship. Now, they took it too serious because, like, for example, Lenin, Stalin, and so on, they stayed at the moment of the dictatorship, and most socialist countries stayed at the moment of the dictatorship. But the idea of Marx communism is something which things are in common, and the state slowly fade, and then and the division of labor is not existing anymore. So for one part of your life you do intellectual labor, for one part of your life you do material labor, and so on and so forth. So he had this idea of communism, which he never developed so much, because he's saying, I'm not an utopist, I'm a realist. So I say, yeah, just communist, blah, 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 but he never described exactly how this was done. So what we see in the history of socialism is rather the fact that they preserved the state, they took the state, and they put all the economy in the hands of the state. So we call it state socialism, or real socialism. So we have the idea of Marx, socialism, Marxism, communism, and then we have the historical representations of this idea, which we call real socialism, which we call state socialism. This is what happened. Why this happened? Why do we have this historical representation of the idea of Marx? Why? Because one guy took a train from Switzerland to Moscow one day, right moment, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, Virtue and Fortune. So he wrote a lot of Machiavelli. He was also a very realist politician. He made the right alliances with the right people and so on. And he also looked a lot at Robespierre and at the French Revolution. So what is this problem? He was also pretty good in making theories. So he was pretty good in reading. He read Marx very, 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 very well, and he realized that he had a big, big problem. So the point in his career, he wrote many books, The Friends of the People. So this is because in Russia you had populists. Populists were also wanted to make a revolution, but they wanted to make a revolution centered on the obscena. Obscena. How do you say obscena? Do you know this concept? What is obscena?
Community.
A unity. Of what?
Community.
A community. Yeah, exactly. So populists wanted to make a revolution based on obscena. So the agricultural communities in which things were kind of in common, So he wanted to make a small community in which you had kind of socialism. So this was the Russian populists. They said, yeah, they have to establish a socialism based on this small community of obscena and so on. Lenin said, no, look, I'm Marxist. So these obscena things, these old things, we have to go in the direction of economic development, industrial development, and we have to establish, a different thing. So first he wrote against populists. Then he wrote this book, The Development of Capitalism in Russia. In this book he says, in Russia we have to make industrial development to make socialism, because socialism is the power to the working class who works in the factory, to the proletariat. So he was, kind of Marxist. And he wrote materialism and empiriocriticism, very, very, very developed, theory of how you think through Marxist ideas, what is empirical materialism, historical materialism, and so on. He also wrote this book on imperialism, in which he described the fact that a capitalist nation needs to expand to the global world, needs to make new empires based on exchange, based on capitalist accumulation, and so they must become global somehow. But the problem that he had is that at a certain moment he understood that Russia was ready for making a revolution. Was ready because people were pretty angry, they already tried, they tried a lot of coups, there was terrorist group who were acting against the Tsar, they tried to kill the Tsar already in 1904. So he felt that Russia was ready for the revolution. And so he faced this contradiction. He faced this contradiction of saying, yeah, we are ready for the revolution, but according to my ideas, I'm Marxist, we're not ready for the revolution because it was still a peasant country. It didn't have industrialization. It didn't have industries. It didn't have a lot of industries. So what should we do? What should we do? What should we do? And at the end we decided, no, we make the revolution. It was in this ground, it was Machiavellian, it was Jacobin, it was like Robespierre. He said, okay, I'm gonna go, he put this party, Bolsheviks, which was a minority party, it was a small group of people, but they were very well prepared, very well determined, and they made the revolution through politics. It was in contradiction with Marxism, because Marxism said, yeah, revolution must come through a social movement, economic development, and so on, but he took really politics for serious, and he made this revolution. And he wrote this book. In the year of the revolution, he wrote The State and Revolution, 1917, same year when they did the Russian Revolution. He wrote this book, The State and Revolution. This book was about the fact that revolution in the medium term must abolish the state. How? You have to make Soviets. Soviets, it's the fact that you have to develop the country by building factories, by building, a proper industrial system, and the industrial system must be ruled by the Soviets. The Soviets is the community of the workers within the factory who govern the production, is the community of the workers in the village, in the city, who govern the city. So it's kind of saying, democracy is direct democracy exercised not at a political level but at a social level through this group of workers, this assembly of Soviets who exercise kind of direct democracy. So he said the state should be abolished. But then, as we know, they never abolished the state because they in reality, they took all the power into the state and they think and it became a dictatorship. So this is what we have to remember about socialism, Karl Marx, and Lenin. So now we are almost ready. To go to the last part of the course, which is the 20th century, contemporary world, and so on. Before making this, we have to get back to the other big ideology, which is the main ideology of Western countries and which is very much opposed against socialism. So what is this ideology which is very much opposed? We have socialism, and what do we have against socialism? Liberalism. So we make a few more points about liberalism. We're gonna see a kind of liberals who were living at the same times of Marx in the 19th century, and who tried to adapt liberalism to the industrial revolution. And these two are, one, we take a British guy, John Stuart Mill, and one, we took a French guy, Alexis de Tocqueville. So I guess we have two presentations of these two guys, right?
But they're not here today.
They're not here today.
And they said that they told you about it, and you said that next week they probably gonna present on Monday.
Yeah.
I guess they're not here. Yeah.
I say that.
They're two Italian girls.
Yeah. Very bad. Okay. On Monday we're gonna get these two presentations on these people. So let's go through these two people. Let's go through liberalism again. Liberalism. We already introduced through John Locke, and through the American Revolution. So let's remember it again. What is liberalism? Liberalism is the very, very foundation of Western politics. You know, in Western politics you have different ideas, but liberalism is more or less present everywhere, at least so far. Right now we have fascists taking power everywhere, so I don't know. But for all the years after World War II, these were the basic foundations of Western civilization, of all the countries who are in the European Union, in the NATO, and so on. So individualism. The centerpiece of liberal theory is the individual, who is assumed to be rational and self-interested. The individual is the building block of society. So liberalism is very much centered on the individual. The individual has rights prior to entering into society. We remind, John Locke about this idea of natural rights. And thus so, he wants to protect these rights. So the community is a collection of individuals. This is liberalism. Liberalism is based on individual and on individual rights. This is why if you look at liberal institutions, they focus very much on civil rights. They want to have very good courts. They want to have international courts, local courts. They want courts to act very, very, very well because they protect rights. So the judiciary system for the individuals, protecting the individuals through a good and fair judiciary system is crucial for liberalism. It's more important than the assembly, than the parliament, than the right to participate, and so on. So politics is viewed as instrumental. For liberalism, politics should be reduced because a person is happy when he has the freedom outside of the state, when he can do whatever he wants. And the state is a limitation because it makes law, it says, this you cannot do, this you cannot do, this you cannot do, this you can do. So this is the point. So politics is used as instrumental. So it's seen as a means, not as an end. As Simona said, you said Simona, right? Yeah. It's seen as a means to advance interests beyond itself, rather than as an end in itself, undertaken as a means to advance these interests. So, why? Because, as we said, liberalism is based on the idea of negative freedom. Negative freedom. Who asked this? I asked to you, Sabrina, this question. How did you answer?
The individual is free to do whatever it wants, anything that's outside of the law.
Yeah. So that freedom begins when law ends. So negative freedom means you're free when there is an absence of coercive interference by other people and by the state. So you're free when you don't have the state to control you, when you don't have the police crimes and say, you cannot do this. So we have, this is why you have to reduce the state to the minimum, because the more you make the government bigger, the less freedom you have. This is the idea in the United States of America, for example. The United States of America, they understand that not having health care for everybody is a bad thing. That saying, if you go to the United States, you see people dying literally dying in the streets because they are sick and they don't have health insurance. But still, Americans, they're very liberal, they're based on liberalism, and so they say, yeah, but to make health care, what do you have to do? You have to make a state system, administration, you have to make a bureaucracy that enforce taxation, and that bring this taxation to enforce healthcare, and then you have to build a structure of the state to make healthcare, and then you have to regulate this and to regulate this, and then you have to make people pay taxes and so on. So your freedom is, damaged by the growth of this state system. So we prefer to have people dying in the streets rather than making the state bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Because we see that freedom, we want to be free, and we think that freedom starts when there is not, the state. So there is also, we see that in the 19th century, liberalism becomes very much.
Can you explain the second concept again?
Politics is viewed as instrumental. So, politics. So, you have individuals. The individuals are crucial, okay? And the individuals have their rights, okay? And these rights are crucial. What is politics? Politics is just an instrument to make this right respected. So, it's an instrument that grants you to have courts that protect your rights, to have a judicial system that protects your right, to have a police that enforces the protection of your rights. Meaning that if you have a right to property, to enjoy your property, the state must be the instrument to set up the police who protect your property, and if you come to steal my property, the police comes and beat you and put you in jail. Right? So it's an instrument to protect your individual rights, to freedom, to life, to private property. Private property. So this is why, since we consider private property to be a crucial civil right, in the 19th century, liberalism becomes very much intertwined with capitalism. This has many different reasons, but let's say, for example, the state, according to liberalism, must be smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So you want to reduce legislation, you want to reduce the government, you want to reduce state intervention. When you have a free space, we all know that, capitalism arrives. When there is possibility of profits, capitalism arrives. So when you don't have the state to say, make a limitation, for sure everything is gonna be, they're gonna try to make, some kind of commodity. We made this example yesterday, like social media. Social media is the commodification of human relation between people, is the commodification of human emotions, because you use social media to express your emotion, maybe, to get in touch with a girl you like and so on, but whilst you're trying to express your emotions, the algorithm takes your emotions and put it in the market and sell your profile to a company who want to sell something which is related to this emotion that you're expressing, right? So, or you fear to die, so you go on Google and you look for, these symptoms of this deadly disease, and then Google sells your emotions to a company who's gonna target you with targeted advertising. So we understand that capitalism really enters everywhere it can. Really, the goal of capitalism, the point of capitalism is to make commodities, to produce commodities, and to make new things and new things to become commodities that can exchange and that can make profit. So liberalism say, let's make the state smaller, let's make less legislation, but when there is absence of legislation, there is capitalism. And for liberals, capitalism is a good way, to express your own capacities. For liberalism, inequality is good because, you see that other people have more, so this is a motivation for you to do more. So liberalism really doesn't care about inequality. Say inequality is good because it gives you motivation to improve, and capitalism is a good system to make it work. Because capitalism, there is no prejudice. It's not that you're there because you're an aristocrat. No, everybody can get a lot of property. The American dream. If you work hard and blah blah blah, you can become billionaire. So this is liberalism is intertwining with capitalism. They think it's a good system to make inequality work in a good way. You have to guarantee equal opportunities, means there is no aristocracy, means you don't have it also. They say, when you have state structures, what happened is that you have corruption. So people put their friend, their cousin, the wife, their daughter instead of putting the best one. Instead, market competition really is more efficient because put the best thing in charge. Money is democratic because money doesn't look if you were born aristocrat, or if your father is important, money is money. It's competition and goes where the best things are. So we have an intertwine between liberalism and capitalism. So we're gonna look at two thinkers of this. So let's start with Alexis de Tocqueville. Let's start with Alexis de Tocqueville first. Alexis de Tocqueville thinks of democracy exactly like Sabrina. Yeah. Okay. Alexis de Tocqueville. So, Sabrina, what did you say about democracy?
I actually did some research and I found a word that actually matches my thoughts. It's called meritocracy. Meritocracy.
Meritocracy.
It's like only the best should rule for general interest. Like not anyone should be able to run for president or run for office because you can rule with the desire of just opinion, not knowledge.
Yeah. Basically, this is the idea of meritocracy. No? The idea of meritocracy is kind of an evolution, democratic evolution of the idea of aristocracy. So you should give the opportunity to people to express their capacities. And those who have the best capacity should rule. So the merit, you deserve it. You deserve to rule. This is liberalism. This is also capitalism. You know, you deserve, you go in the market, you risk your life, you put yourself at risk, you show that you're a genius, you work 24 hours per day, and then you get the result because you had the merit. You're lazy, you deserve to be in the street dying of hunger. Liberalism. Okay? So what we're gonna try to understand with this guy, Alexis de Tocqueville, is the fact that even though we often think as liberalism and democracy, liberal democracy as intertwined, they have points of opposition. They are different. Democracy is about equality. Liberalism is about merit, individual capacity, freedom. Democracy is about equality. Liberalism is about liberty. So, this guy, Alexis de Tocqueville, uses it to see a little bit the liberal critique of democracy. So let's see the story. He lived like pretty much contemporary to Karl Marx. Also this guy, all the 19th century, okay? So he was born aristocrat. He was, very elegant, very cultivated, very good language, very aristocratic guy. Very aristocratic guy. So he had to go through the French Revolution. But since he was smart, he said, yeah, it's right, we have to make this revolution. We have to make this revolution. He didn't like that much, but he said, yeah, for century we had aristocracy, but right now we have to make civil equality for everybody. So he even supported the revolution. But what they did, the revolution, then we have the terror, we have Robespierre, so they killed those who framed the revolution. So he got a bit traumatized because he said, I'm supporting civil equality, but then you make the revolution, I support the revolution, killed all my family just because we're aristocrats. No, that's not good. So, blah, blah, blah. What happened in 19th century France, after the Restoration and so on, he became a magistrate of the state. He worked for the government. And the government sent him to the United States of America because the government wanted to rethink, prison. Because in France at that time you still have, physical punishment. You break the law, we beat you in the street, we cut your hand, blah, blah, blah. Whilst in the United States, they already created a modern prison system, which is just we take you and put in a jail, in jail for a certain amount of time, depending on what you did. So they said, okay, Alexis, you go to the United States and you